Here's a special video for the ones who love falling asleep to scary stories. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and turn on the bell for more content. I had always known the 1964 Ford Mustang to be my grandpa's pride and joy. He barely let anyone else touch it, let alone drive it. I think he had bought it when it was brand new. He had probably paid a fair bit for it back then, but it was probably worth a lot more now. It was still in pristine condition, which is because of the love and care that my grandpa showed it. Most weekends you would find him washing the car and giving it a good polish. He did the most of the mechanical work himself too. I don't think he would trust anyone else to work on it. I'm not a huge car person myself, so I don't fully understand my grandpa's obsession with the vehicle, but I have seen the joy that it has brought him, and I always like to see him happy. He lost a bit of his natural charm and joy when Grandma died a few years ago, but whenever I see him tinkering with his Mustang, and I see the smile on his face and the twinkle in his eye, I begin to understand his passion for the car. My grandpa has always been slightly different. Don't get me wrong, he's a great man, a great father figure to me, and usually bright and cheery fellow. I guess what makes him a bit different is how particular he is about certain things. Everything needs to be done in a certain order or a certain way, and he can get quite frustrated if you don't follow his peculiar way of doing something. I remember when I was little while visiting my grandparents, Grandpa tried to teach me that the only way to brush your teeth was by first squeezing the toothpaste into your mouth first and then started brushing. Or the other time when he insisted that the only way to get rid of the hiccups was to swallow a teaspoon of honey and then jump up and down 10 times. He has plenty of other strange customs and methods too. Whether it's always locking the basement door and not allowing anyone down there because you will let the sand out, whatever that means, or the fact that he hated the song Under the Broad Walk so much that he banned any mention of it. So, I guess that pretty much sums up my grandpa, a bit of a strange man with a bit of a strange obsession with his car. That's why I was so surprised when he actually let me drive it. It was early one morning. I had come around to visit him and try to get a few odd jobs done that he was no longer capable of doing himself. He was getting older and I wanted to be a good grandkid and help him out. When I arrived that morning, he answered the door still in his dressing gown. He invited me inside and asked if I wouldn't mind waiting for him in the kitchen. He was going to finish getting ready, but he was probably going to be another 10 minutes or so. I made my way to the kitchen and sat down on one of the rock-hard wooden chairs that sat around the large kitchen table. Sitting in front of me was yesterday's newspaper, so I picked it up and started to read. I quickly skimmed the headline, "Farmer claims to have seen Bigfoot on Shepherd's Road." I then read an article about the disappearance of Sandy Fraser, a woman who went missing over 40 years ago. And I was halfway through reading about the hitchhiker killer when Grandpa entered the kitchen. He was now dressed in an old pair of long pants, a dull green shirt, and a woolen vest that sat over the top of the shirt. I almost immediately noticed that he had his hand held up high and he was grasping a set of keys. "Today's your lucky day, champ," he said to me with a grin. "You get to drive the old girl." At first, I couldn't believe what I just heard. Had he really just said that I could drive the Mustang? Grandpa then walked closer to me and placed the keys into the palm of my hand. I felt the cold metal on my fingers, and I knew then that he was serious. I was going to drive the car. "I need you to collect a few things for me today," Grandpa then told me. "Now, as you know, I'm getting a bit too old to be driving here, there, and everywhere, so I think it's best that you do it." Besides, it would be best if you get a bit of a practice driving the Ford, just in case someone leaves you one in their will. As he finished the sentence, Grandpa gave me a slight smirk, and I swear that I saw him give me a wink. I was getting the car in the will? I really couldn't believe this. I must have been staring at him in disbelief because he then began to speak again. "Of course, you didn't hear that from me," he said with a bit of a chuckle. "And of course, I will need to teach you a few things about driving her before you set off today." So that's how I spent the next hour and a half learning all about the car's features and the best way to drive it. I learned how I should only adjust the mirrors while wearing gloves so that I don't leave grubby fingerprints. And I learned that I should only use the windscreen wipers if it is an emergency. I also found out that the old AM radio no longer worked, and that it was a good thing because listening to the radio while driving is a big distraction. I nodded and agreed to everything that Grandpa was telling me, but deep down, I think we both knew I wasn't actually going to follow his advice. The last thing that he told me was that I needed to visit the shops that were in town, and the best way to go to get there was down Shepherd's Road. Shepherd's Road is a small and narrow dirt road that used to be the main way into town, but once the highway was built, it pretty much became obsolete, but Grandpa still swears that it is the best way to travel to town. I agreed that I would drive down the Shepherd's Road instead of taking the smoother and much faster highway. After my long and not very informative lecture was over, it was time to hit the road. I hopped into the Mustang and fired her up. She roared into life, and I immediately understood Grandpa's love for the car. There was something about the way she sounded and the way that it felt while sitting in the driver's seat that made me feel powerful, a feeling I could get used to. I gave Grandpa a wave and took off slowly, trying to show him that I was taking care of his pride and joy. Once he was out of sight, however, I put my foot down and started to have a bit more fun with the car. I made my way out to the old dirt path known as Shepherd's Road, and before long, I was staring at the windy, dusty road. For a second, I thought about turning around and heading for the highway, but decided against it. He would know I took the highway if I returned in a sparkly clean car and not a dusty and dirty car that would instantly need washing. So I bit the bullet and started down Shepherd's Road. It was bumpy. My God, it was bumpy. I felt every little jolt and bounce, and it felt like I was operating a jackhammer, not driving a car. I persevered though and continued bouncing my way down the road. I didn't see any other car or living soul. Most people were smart enough to take the highway. I continued bouncing around in my seat for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes or so, when I saw her. She was walking down the center of the road. She was wearing an olden-style stripy frock. She was walking the same way that I was traveling, so I couldn't see her face. All I could see was the back of the frock she was wearing and the low-heel shoes that she was wearing on her feet. She was walking slowly, seemingly minding her own business. I don't think she heard me coming from behind her because she didn't turn around to look at me or acknowledge that I was there. I slowed the Mustang down and slowly approached the walking woman. Maybe I could give her a lift, I thought, but then my mind wandered back to the newspaper I had read that morning. The words hitchhiker killer entered my mind, and I thought better of stopping and letting her in the car. I was now maybe 10 meters away or so from this woman, and I began to drive out wide, trying to get the car as far away from her as possible. That's when the radio in front of the Mustang fired up and began to play. Under the Broad Walk came blaring out of the speakers. It gave me a fright and I jumped up in my seat, this time because of the fear and not because of the bumpy road. I thought the radio was broken, but here it was, playing as clear and as loud as it would have when the car was new. We'll be having some fun under the Broad Walk. The radio sang. I looked down for a moment, trying to figure out how to turn this stupid thing down, but I couldn't figure it out. I just looked up the road once more. I was now almost level with the walking woman who still didn't appear to have noticed me. I was about to steer the car outwards just a little bit more just to make sure that I wouldn't hit her when I felt the steering wheel spin in my hands. It was spinning the other way. It was steering the car straight into the woman. The car was now directly in line with the woman. I quickly tried to find the brake with my foot, but as I lifted my foot off the accelerator, I felt it push down all by itself. The car lurched forward, accelerating quickly. I heard the thud first and then saw the woman crash into the windscreen. Small cracks appeared when she struck the glass. She then rolled back off of the windscreen into the front of the car, then finally off of the hood onto the ground below. I had just hit someone. I didn't mean to. The car had done itself. I was sure of it. It was the one that swerved and sped into her. That didn't matter now, though. I was the one driving, so I was the one responsible. I sat there for a moment unsure of what to do. I looked to the front of the car, and I could see the woman's legs poking out from the front of the car. They were unmoving. I reached for the door handle, pulled it, and got out the car. I slowly walked to the front of the car and looked around and saw her lying there, in a pool of her own blood. The whole front of the car was covered in blood, and my first thought was, that definitely needs a clean. I looked down at the woman, and that's when I realized I recognized her. I had seen her just that morning, not in person, but a photo of her. She was Sandy Fraser, the woman who had disappeared all those years ago. There wasn't something strange about her, though. She still looked young, exactly like she did in the photo in the newspaper. She hadn't aged a day. This was very strange, and I really didn't know what to think. All I knew was that Grandpa was right. The radio was incredibly distracting while driving. If it hadn't started playing that bloody song, that none of this would have happened. I wouldn't have tried to turn it down, and I wouldn't have hit this woman. But the fact remained the same. I had hit this woman. Now the question was, what do I do with her now? I really don't know what came over me when I made this decision, but I decided that the best course of the action was to pick her body and place it into the trunk of the car. I walked over to the body lying in the road, bent down and scooped her up. She was a lot heavier than she looked, but with a bit of effort, I managed to lift her up and walk her to the back of the car. I had to put her down again to open up the trunk, but once it was open, I lifted her up once again and I managed to stuff her body inside. I was closing the trunk when I saw it. I could have sworn just as the trunk closed, I saw Sandy open one of her eyes. But that wasn't an issue for now. I could deal with that later. The trunk was already closed, and so I made my way back to the front of the car and hopped back inside. I started up the Mustang again, and it roared into life. I closed my eyes for a second and then reopened, and then found myself staring at the start of a dusty road and the street sign that read Shepherd's Road. I was back at the start of the road. In fact, I don't think I had even begun my journey down there yet. My windscreen was still in pristine condition. There was no crack in sight. I felt as if I had just blacked out and everything I had just experienced was not real. Well, actually, I think it was real, but it was not my experience that I felt. I felt as if I now knew exactly what had happened to Sandy Fraser all those years ago. I'm not sure whether or not somehow the car showed me my grandpa's experience, his memory, or whether it was something else. But all I know is that now I knew something that was only me and one other person knew. Now I had to decide, do I tell someone or do I continue to hide his secret? It's been raining on and off for the past week. That tends to happen a lot when you live in the south during the summer months. It was last Wednesday, around 7ish, when it started to drizzle. Half of the sun had already disappeared from the sky when the dark, ominous clouds took over the dark, pinkish, almost dark purple horizon. I was sitting out on the porch reading a book in my wicker rocking chair. I very much enjoy the rainy weather that comes with this time of the year. I just find the soft drip drops of the rain pitter-pattering on the ground below comforting. I was sitting there gently rocking in my chair, nose deep into my young adult fantasy romance novel, when I noticed that the world around me had gone silent. The sweet bird song and the sound of the branches swaying up and down as the little squirrels traveled along then ceased to exist. Curious, I re-emerged into reality and took a peek in front of my yard. I lived atop a rather steep hill in a rather large house for just myself living there. I was located by a main road that went in and out of the tiny town I inhabited. My only neighbor for about 1.5 miles was the small but lush green woods that were right across the street from my house. Since it was dusk, there wasn't much light, and it didn't help that there were dark gray storm clouds above my head either. But I swear I could make out the shape of a person just a few yards from the tree line. I couldn't make out any defining details, and for a second I thought I might just be seeing things. But the sheer darkness of the person's silhouette, the darkest shade of black I've ever seen, contrasted vastly to the dullish gray that surrounded it and convinced me otherwise. Freaked out, I quickly got up and out of my rocking chair and straight into the house, locking the door behind me as I entered. After a quick sweep of my estate, making sure all the windows and doors were locked, I felt relatively safe again. My bedroom window faced into the street, so I snuck a glance to see if the person was still there. By now it was dark outside, and without any light, I couldn't even see down the road. With sudden flash of lightning, the person's silhouette was enlightened. A loud crack and boom of thunder sounded seconds later. The storm had picked up and rain was pelting against the roof and windows of my home. The singular streetlight hummed to life, illuminating the figure permanently. It was closer to my house now, practically in the middle of the road. I'm almost 100% sure it was facing my house. They looked completely dry considering the heavy rain falling down from the heavens. Another flash of lightning caressed the sky and was followed by another powerful crack of thunder. The ambience of the storm just made my whole situation 10 times creepier. I decided that if I heard any suspicious noises from directly outside my house, I would call the authorities. Although it was terrifying to see, the figure wasn't really harming me. I mean, besides being a nightmare fuel, so I couldn't do much about it. I left the window and crawled back into bed with my book. I began to pick up where I left off, but straining my ears for any suspicious sounds. Eventually, though, I fell asleep. I awoke the next morning to birds chirping and golden rays of sunshine shining directly into my eyes. The events of last night caused me to go to my window first thing. All I saw was a small car driving past and the same tree line that had greeted me every morning since the day I moved in. After a cup of coffee, I decided to look around my property for footprints or anything that could indicate a possible crime was almost committed. Call me paranoid, but that person could have been a robber, or even worse yet, an escaped convict. I didn't live by any prisons, but it was still a possibility, in my mind anyway. The rest of the day went as any other. I ate breakfast, I tidied up the house, and by the time that was done, it was time for dinner. As I finished cleaning the kitchen after my meal, I could see the storm cloud rolling in from the window that overlooked my porch from the kitchen sink. It was going to be another rainy night, and I was elated. About an hour later, it began to rain again. I thought nothing of it as I sat down to catch up on some TV shows. Normally, the rain showers would last 30 minutes to an hour, but by the time 2 hours had passed, it was still raining outside. The day was extra humid than normal, and I've been in several hour showers before, so yet again, I chalked it up to good old Mother Nature. I decided to take a peek out of my bedroom window. Either out of paranoia or curiosity, or just because I knew deep down in my gut, there they were. Under the street lamp, 3 figures this time. One was in front, and 2 behind the first one, equidistant to each other, all looking like carbon copies of the first one. I watched for hours as they just stood there. I don't know who they were or what they wanted, and it freaked me the heck out. Eventually, I got agitated and stormed out onto my covered porch. "What the hell do you want?" I yelled at the figures. No response. "Why are you here? If you don't leave, I'm going to call the cops." Again, silence. I stormed back inside. Comically, as I slammed the door, a loud thunderous boom shook my house as a light blue streak lit up the sky. I tried to call the police, but my phone line was down. I could have gone outside to my car, but my gut told me not to go near those things. I remembered that they were gone this morning, so all I could hope to do in the moment was wait. I awoke to gray storm clouds. It was still raining, and those things were still out there, taunting me, beckoning me. I turned to the news channel. At this point, it would have been raining for 15 hours. Absolutely nothing about the continuous rain. It's been raining for a week straight. I'm trapped in my home. Every single fiber of my being is telling me not to go out there, because they're still there. Even in the middle of the day, when visibility is best, their only black bodies are there glaring at me menacingly. I've concluded they were some kind of shadow creatures with nefarious intent. They keep coming, multiplying. I think there's at least 100 of them out there by now. They keep coming closer. The first one from the first night is at my porch steps, mere feet away from the safety of inside. I stare into the nothingness that is its face every time I look through the window on my door. The only thing between us is the 4 walls of my house. They are so close, yet so far. They keep calling me even though they don't possess any mouths. They yearn for me to go out there to them. They beg me to join them. They are compelling me and convincing me to leave my humble abode. I think after I'm done with this, I'm going to go out there. As a forensic cleaner, there are many things that I've seen that I will never be able to forget, but nothing compared to what I had to see last night. A usual day for me is going to work and cleaning up blood and sometimes chunks and lumps of human remains. I always thought that those were the worst jobs that I would ever have to do, but I was completely wrong. It had started when I woke up at 4:35 a.m. to hurry up and get ready for work. When I got there had already been a call for me to go clean what had seemed to be, at the time, a genocide. I spaced out for a second. A genocide? I thought. I never had to clean up after more than 2 people, let alone a large group of them. From what was so far on the case file, they're unsure about how many bodies there were, but it was not a defined genocide. They had found that there were bodies of all ethnicities instead of just one. I closed the file before I got into the car with my supplies. It took me about 7.5 minutes to get to the crime scene location. where I saw that it seemed to be an abandoned 19th century Victorian-style home. I prepared myself before even passing the crime scene tape. I hadn't even gotten to the porch when I smelled the most horrendous smell imaginable. I almost vomited, but I couldn't take my hand away from my nose. I went back to the car to get nose plugs, and I proceeded to walk into the crime scene. As I walked through the front door, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were no bodies, just parts of what had been. The pile of flesh, guts, and hair was no shorter than me, and I'm 5'7". The area altogether spanned 29 square feet. There were about 12 forensics there, including me. I had started putting what I thought to be the matching remains of each person's in its own body bag, hoping that I wouldn't get any two people mixed together. It was truly disgusting. As we were cleaning, we found what happened to be a dome in the center of the remains, made out of what also appeared to have been the skeletal remains of those bodies. The forensic team uncovered what had appeared to have been the internal and outer remains of 27 human bodies. We hauled all of the body bags into meat trucks to be taken to several different morgues across the state to try and possibly see if they could identify the cause of death of any of the bodies. After that, we had to return to the dome, which we thought was filled with skeletons, since the outside of it was of that. We tried as carefully as possible to keep each bone intact while still holding the dome together and in place. It was almost as if we were all playing a gruesome and gory game of Jenga. One by one, we eventually got to see that the dome was not completely filled. The bottom had a small crevice of space, much like roll space. That actually came to my mind, and I was completely petrified when I saw a square door in the middle of the wall of bones. I figured that nothing could stand the smell of that place, nor would someone be psychotic enough to keep themselves buried under it all. I was right about the someone part. Just before we had recovered all of the bones that remained, from the floor door we all hear a thumping noise. I immediately screamed for the police to get in the room that the forensics were in. The police rushed back in and they had all pulled their guns from their belt, pointing them at the floor door, not knowing what else to do. After about a minute, the thumping had stopped, and the deputy quietly sprint walked to open the door. But before he did, a strange, non-human-like creature exerted itself from the door, ripping the deputy and the two other people from officers into piles of flesh and bones before the gunshots appeared to have killed it. Everyone was incredibly terrified, but we felt a small amount of ease when we found that it appeared to be unalive. The creature had gray, pale skin. Its body walked on all fours, with each of its limbs twisted behind itself in an inhuman manner. Its eyes were glowing like a cat, but appeared to be black, both empty pits of nothingness. The forensics team were quickly evacuated and later taken into custody of the Secret Services. We were all separated and we told them the exact same story, how it started with the massive pile of human flesh and the huge dome of bones. The man of the Secret Services told us that they were going to be watching over us and made us swear to keep this private between us and them. After what seemed like 12 hours of interrogation and affirmation, each of us got escorted home by a Secret Services guard, where we each be placed under watch for 2 months. After I had got home that night, I went to bed. I ended up waking at around 5 a.m. to a knock at my window. I slowly moved the curtain and I froze in shock. That thing was staring into my soul. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare back at it in complete terror. I suddenly woke up in a cold sweat. Oh my God, it was a dream. I quickly pulled back the curtains and nothing was there. The guard rushed in after hearing me gasp, and I told him what had happened. He went back to whatever he was doing in the other room. I quit my job the next morning. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing any more gore, and I will never be able to forget that thing that attacked and killed those 3 policemen. I can't even schedule any therapy sessions due to the fact that I'm currently under watch by the government, and I have to keep those traumatizing thoughts strictly private. I've decided that it might be a good idea to log my thoughts down in a journal so I don't have to keep everything to myself. For reference, today is September 23rd, 2021. I woke up at around 2:15 p.m. today, and I swear to God that I saw that thing out of the corner of my eye while I was making coffee. I think that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, or I might have just been a bit tired. While I'm taking a break from working, I've been trying to find a job that will be suitable for me. I've applied to 2, a nanny, caretaker, and a personal shopper. I think that I have a pretty good resume, so I'm hoping for the best. 25th of September 2021. I've had the same dream about that thing, yesterday and today. As more time passes, I just try to think of it as a bad dream, but I can't stop thinking about it, since there is a man from Secret Services guarding me 24/7. I swear that he keeps staring at me while sticking his tongue out when he thinks that I'm not looking. I don't know for sure, but this all just seems too weird. I also could have sworn that I saw that thing on the stairs while I was watching TV in the living room. 27th of September 2021. I still haven't heard back from either of the jobs that I applied to a few days ago. I also can't find the website that I applied them on. I really haven't been taking care of myself ever since the incident happened. It's okay though. It's only been 5 days and I don't really have anywhere to be. I've been feeling really uncomfortable around the Secret Services guard. I feel like he isn't human. I've continued to see him stick his tongue out of the corner of my eye, and I've been hearing him whisper nonsense words. 5th of October 2021. I truly think that the Secret Services guard is not human. I've been hearing his gibberish whispering while I'm in my bed trying to sleep. He's supposed to be outside during that time, but I feel like he just hides outside of my bedroom door stalking me and doing that weird thing with his tongue. I found out that I supposedly never submitted any applications, which makes me even more suspicious of the whole Secret Services thing. I'll check back in if I see or hear anything else that seems suspicious. 30th of October 2021. Every day now, I've seen that thing out of the corner of my eye. I know it's there. I only see it when the Secret Services guard isn't around. I'm starting to believe that they sent that thing to kill me. I mean, they didn't want anyone to know about it, right? I know I'm not crazy. The government is trying to make me think that I'm crazy so that they can put me in one of those mental institutions and that the whole thing will blow over. I have to kill it before it kills me. I'll make sure that the public finds my journal so that everyone can know what the government is doing. It's controlling us. 11th of November 2021. I just saw the Secret Services guard shape-shift into that thing. I'm not seeing it in the corner of my eyes anymore. It's real. I had a few doubts before, but I saw his true form. I am going to kill it very soon. It's man form. 13th of November 2021. I've done it. It's dead. I stabbed it while it was sleeping in my living room. I'm going to burn it, and once done, I know that it will be gone forever. The government can't fool me again. 14th of November 2021. They've got me. They keep trying to convince me that I am mentally ill. They say I've developed schizophrenia and I am experiencing severe psychosis. This is all a lie. They are lying to you all. 24th of November 2021. I was found not guilty of murdering that Secret Service's guard for reasons of insanity. I'm being transferred to Patton State Hospital in Bernardo, California. I will never get out of there. The government has silenced me. I am going to throw this journal out of the window when I'm on the bus in hopes that someone finds this and spreads my story. My name is Jane Elizabeth Andrews, and I have been silenced by the government. They have twisted my story every which way to make me look insane. Please, I beg of you to spread this. That is it for the video. If you're still here and if you want to, leave the rainy cloud emoji so that I know that you made to the end. Otherwise, comment down below anything you want. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell. Also, don't forget to check the mystery link in the description. I will see you in my next video.